This is the last video tutorial in the series about how to analyse for the two exam papers for the English language exams, and in this tutorial we're going to be looking at comparative analysis. This is the analysis of the similarities and differences in the way that the two writers of non-fiction text present the same aspect of sight. So we'll begin again with the question. Part B of question 7 on paper 2 is always going to ask you to compare text 1 and text 2 as whole text. So you are dealing with the whole text, you're analysing and you're evaluating, but the analysis skills are really important for this one. The focus of that comparison is always going to be the way that the two writers present a common aspect of sight. It is worth 14 marks, so you do have to provide a full PED essay in response to this question. The key to this question is equal treatment of the two texts. So the expectation is that you will have equally detailed comments on text 1 and text 2 throughout your response, which, when you look at the way the PED paragraphs are structured, is quite a reasonable expectation. Your comments within those PED paragraphs need to focus on the way that the similarities and differences in the use of specific language and structural devices reveal the writer's thoughts and feelings about their subject matter. So you'll be asked to compare the presentation of a common, it could be subject, idea, theme or event, and you have to explain how the writers think and feel differently or similarly about that particular aspect. So what is it that you need to compare? Well, specific language and structural devices. As with all of the other analysis questions, this one is asking you to zoom in to the details and pick out examples of the writer making deliberate choices of language and structure. This time though, you're being asked to look at the way those devices are used either similarly or differently across two texts. So it's this synthesis of information, being able to handle two texts and understand that different people have different takes for different reasons on the same topic. You're also being asked to write about the way that these devices reveal the writer's attitude. So the wording of the question is, how does it reveal their ideas and perspectives on whatever the aspect of sight is? So this time we're not so much looking at the impact on a reader and how it makes the text interesting for the reader, it's more how those devices tell the reader what the writer thinks about their subject matter and how they feel about their subject matter. So you need to think about the reasons why these writers might have different ideas and perspectives about that shared aspect of sight that you're comparing. And so there are a number of things that you need to look at. You need to look at who the writer is. So if you think back to the 7 key questions we ask about literary non-fiction, this is where that comes in. What the writer's relationship to the subject matter is. So are they or were they involved in the subject matter? Are they a third party? Are they a journalist? Why are they writing? Think about why they're writing about this. When was the text written? Now, these texts can be from anywhere between 1900 to last week. So we've got 20th century up to 21st century. Obviously something written in 1900 is going to be very different to something that was written in 2017. So think about how the time period, the context of when the writer was writing is going to affect the ideas and attitudes towards the subject matter. What form the text takes. Now, different forms, as you know, have different conventions, and so the writers might be constricted by the convention of the form that they're writing. And also look at who the intended audience for the text is, because if you're dealing on the one hand with a letter, a private letter between two people that's only designed for one audience, you might get more detail in that than if you're looking at a speech. So you might have, for example, a letter from a politician to their wife about something, and then you might get the transcript of a speech on the same topic. So think about who the audience is, because that's going to affect the kind of information that is in there. And then also think about the purposes of the text. So what are they trying to achieve with this? Are they simply informing and explaining? Is there a persuasive element to it? Are they arguing? Are they giving advice? Why has that text been written? So again, bringing in your knowledge of SPAF to inform your reading, to inform your understanding of the similarities and differences and the reasons for those across these two non-fiction texts. Right, so let's turn to the question then. This is the basic wording of the 7b question. The only thing that changes is the bit at the end, which is the particular aspect of sight. Everything else remains the same. So it starts by telling you to compare, which means look at the similarities and the differences. It tells you how, so again that keyword how is telling you to analyse the effects, not just identify the features. As with the ones on language and structure, it tells you text 1 and 2. That is reminding you that every single P paragraph you write must contain comments and evidence from both of the texts, and you must deal equally with both of the texts. And then you're asked to write about how they present their ideas and perspectives, and this just literally means how the writer is making deliberate choices of language and structure to convey their personal thoughts and feelings about whatever the aspect of sight is. And in this case, we're looking at the theme of winning and losing. Okay, this question is always worth 14 marks and therefore always requires a full PED essay with the PED paragraph structured as follows. So for the point, you need to identify the use of a specific language or structural device being used to convey either a thought or a feeling in one of the texts, usually text 1. You then need to provide evidence from text 1 in either the form of a direct quote, a paraphrase quote, or a reference to that specific device that has been identified in the P part of your P paragraph, in the point part. That needs to be followed by a detailed explanation of how the device that you've identified and illustrated is revealing something about the writer's thoughts or feelings about the aspect of sight that's being compared at that particular point in the text. And then in terms of the development, what you need to do is then identify an example of the same device being used either in the same way or in a different way in the other text. And you need to follow that up with an explanation of what that is revealing. The use of that device in the second text is revealing about the other writer's thoughts and feelings and how that compares and contrasts to the first one. So let's look now at an example of a single PED paragraph from a much longer essay in response to this particular question that you can see on your screen. So the text that we used for that question was the transcript of Tony Blair's speech following the Labour victory in 1997 and an extract from Andre Agassi's autobiography Open, which was from 2009. So here we have the response. I'll read it through and then I'll explain the annotations and the colours. In text 1, Tony Blair uses a group of 3 adjectives to celebrate the character of the British people. He describes them as being creative, compassionate, outward-looking. All 3 are positive qualities indicating his celebration of the British character, but more than that, they relate to the reason why he has won the election, because like the British people, Blair considers himself and his Labour Party to share all these qualities which bring hope for the country now that he and the Labour Party have won the election. In text 2, Agassi also uses a group of 3, but in contrast, his use of the device towards the end of the text is negative, as he uses it to reprimand himself for losing the Grand Slam game. He starts all 3 clauses in lines 27 to 28 with the first person pronoun you, directing his advice at himself. Each clause is presented as a simple statement of fact, indicating that he feels he must simply accept the defeat and, in his words, quit the game. So there are a number of good things going on in here. The point identifies a specific device in text 1. So we know we're dealing with text 1. You need to clearly signal to the examiner which text you're writing about. So we've named text 1, we've identified a group of 3. We've then gone on to give an example of that which is relevant and it illustrates the group of 3, which you can see there in blue, and in this case it's in the form of a direct quotation. We then give a very detailed explanation which focuses on how that specific device, so we're not saying a group of three is a rhetorical device used by writers to emphasise things. We're saying these three adjectives, so we're breaking that group of three down, and we're going right down to word level, and we're saying what that is revealing about the writer, Tony Blair, and his thoughts and feelings about the British people, and how it relates to this idea of winning and losing. We then identify the use of the same device in text 2, but this time we're saying it's being used differently. So we've referred to text 2, we've reiterated the fact we're dealing with a group of three, which is why this is the development part of this P paragraph and not starting a new P paragraph, because we're still writing about the same device. And we've used that contrasting connective there, contrast. We then start our explanation before giving the quotation, and that's fine, that's perfectly acceptable, because it's showing an understanding of where that bit of evidence is going to come from. When we do give the evidence, it's given as a combination of a reference, so the line references, because we're talking about these kind of three-part clauses, three-part sentences, which it would just be too long to quote, and then we quote the key word, which is that personal pronoun you, so that he's directing it to himself. The explanation is then developed and sustained after the evidence has been given, so we don't just quote and then leave it. We add a bit more in terms of our explanation of the effect of that device within that second text, and link it back to the Tony Blair text. So the reason this is an effective comparative analytical P paragraph is because it's identifying specific devices, providing relevant textual evidence to illustrate those, and explaining how those devices reveal the thoughts and feelings of the two writers in relation to the question that's been set. And it also deals equally with both texts. I haven't done a word count on that, but I suggest that there's probably about the same number of words on text 1 as on text 2. So that's the kind of P paragraph that you're aiming for, and obviously you need a series of these in response to 7B, because it is worth 14 marks, so they are expecting a more developed and sustained essay response.